So I think she was actually the first person to sort of give me my first clue. And she said,
Allie, how did you find Carnivore?
"Oh, I was waiting for this question, Dave, and trying to think about where to begin." Um, because of the way that I think it's turned out to affect me, I think that I'll start back from this point, which is that I grew up on a farm, on a dairy farm. So, one thing I feel like I haven't had to struggle with, which I hear a lot of people talking about, which is the idea that meat is bad and milk is bad and fat is bad because we ate so much meat and full fat, raw milk on the farm. I've never had a problem with that. And I just have always known that can't be right. And even though in the mainstream, it's like avoid red meat, definitely eat like low fat everything. And it just never rang true for me. Um, on the other hand, there was everyone in my family wasn't necessarily healthy because there was also a ton of like sugar and baked things and lots of carbs, potatoes, pasta, rice. So when I left home, I've always been interested in nutrition and health. And I think even in my 20s when I left home, I was really interested in baking everything from scratch and having a garden and getting my meat locally if I could and the milk from the nearby farm type of thing. And I think I started having my kids at that point and fed them the same way. And I think we were all doing pretty well for a while. When I think about myself, 20s, okay, 30s. I think when I noticed something starting to happen, and the funny thing is, you don't really connect these things to food for a while. It just seems like, oh, this is just what it is to be like to get pregnant and have a baby. Each time in my with my three kids in the pregnancy, they would start watching my I think they never called it prediabetes, but they were watching my glucose, I think, and, nobody ever said anything about carbs, of course, but so I had no direction. I was just being monitored kind of because I had this, I think it's called preeclampsia. There's, like, swelling and, my ankles were really puffy. There was a lot of edema. And so they just kind of monitored me. Every pregnancy went fine, but I'm sure I was eating like boxes of cereal because I thought like, oh, it's pregnancy. You can eat what you want. And, it was just like your cravings are crazy. Um, and that could not have been helping now I think about it. Um, but what seemed to happen is in my 20s, after each child, I sort of would hang on to a little weight. Plus, the edema never fully went away. So I often had like puffy ankles, it seemed like. And through my 30s, I also still felt like I was in great overall health. Um, I sort of feel like I've always said, I never get sick. I hardly go to the doctor. I just don't get sick. And what I mean by that is like I don't get the colds that go around or my kids coming home with stuff. So I felt like I have a pretty good immune system. I'm sort of naturally healthy. The only concerns I had, I think, were that um, my weight was slowly going up, maybe 10 pounds per decade, again in my 30s when I had another child. And it was probably in my 30s that I started um, getting very headachy. I'd wake up and, it was always, I never really ate much in the morning, but I'd have like some granola or some yogurt, often like granola that I'd probably made or something like that. Um, Oats, the classic oats. I started to notice that um, I was getting headachy, like I was starting to have headaches frequently, and I didn't know why, and they ended up becoming like an everyday thing. Oh, I forgot to say that I had a history of migraines. Um, I had my first migraine when I was a little kid, like 10, and then I didn't have one again until I was 17 in college, and I actually had to go to the hospital because the migraine is like miles out of control compared to just an ordinary headache. Um, and So the migraines would come every so often, like, I don't know, a few times a year, 3, 4, 5 times a year, and those were just debilitating. But outside of those, I was starting to have just kind of like aggravating headaches every single day. It was just kind of increasing. And I remember like, what the heck is going on? And they'd get worse in the spring. And um, I later on realized that, oh, they happened they would get worse and more frequent every April or May. And I started to realize they were connected to outdoor allergies as well. Um, so seasonal allergies, which I'd never had, started to become a regular spring thing for me too. And so the headaches just kept on going. I got used to just taking a lot of ibuprofen almost like every day. And I felt like this can't be good. And maybe it's my eyes and I should have my vision checked or something. You know, you check various things. You see the eye doctor. No, everything looks fine. I I live in a very sort of crunchy, health conscious area. And so I went to see a chiropractor. My back started to hurt and my hips started to hurt when I was in probably like my 40s. The whole thing about it was hard to sleep and get out of bed in the morning. And I'd have to sit there for a while and just kind of wait for everything to kind of warm up. And it's like, once I was up, I wasn't in pain anymore, but I would wake up that way every morning. So all these little things that just seem like, oh, this is aging. This is like what it is, because that's kind of what people say or friends say. Um, I would go to the chiropractor for my back and my hips, and it would give me some relief, but not like a permanent relief or anything. And I started to see an acupuncturist for my headaches, and I really liked her. I saw her off and on for years. And the thing I liked about her is that she was very sciency. You'd think an acupuncturist might be kind of not um, necessarily nutritionally, I don't know, on board or something like that. But probably in my 40s, she was very concerned about the amount of Advil that I was taking. And she was the one who made the connection of like, maybe it's allergies and maybe you could just take some Claritin in the spring or some allergy medication. Um, that did help, but only in the spring when it was allergy season. And so I think she was actually the first person to sort of give me my first clue. And she said, the thing that I see most often with women and aging and like their health is they don't eat enough protein. And was, I probably thought, yeah, you should. I mean, I ate protein probably most meals, but not like I do now. I still had that idea that vegetables are really, really good for you. Like the bulk of your diet should be made of vegetables and grains. And so, it was like I was bought or made the decent bread, that kind of thing. So there was plenty of grains and vegetables. And my favorite meal actually was like a huge salad because I really liked it. And, some chicken or, whatever, tuna, sometimes beef, I guess. But so I didn't really understand. I thought I'm doing this thing that at that point, the doctors and people would say, oh, you should be eating for your health, um, healthy whole foods. And I only recently realized they don't say that anymore. They don't say healthy whole foods. They say moderation because I think at that point they were aware that processed food was not good. But I think that's shifted because I never hear anybody like those nutritionists online say, "Oh, healthy whole foods," um, because they don't want you eating stuff you cook from scratch.
Yeah, it's more like everything in balance. As long as it's
Yes,
balanced, it's okay.
I realize that's like a super subtle shift that's changed. I think doctors used to say, "If you've got health concerns, just eat healthy whole foods," but they don't say that anymore, which I just recently realized. So, but anyway, that's what I was doing. I was eating everything kind of. I wouldn't buy, didn't buy a lot of processed packaged food at the time anyway. So I thought, what's the problem here? And when my acupuncturist said that, I thought, she said, if you can at least, I know you're not super hungry in the morning, but if you can at least start out your day with a little bit of protein, like an egg or, she was like, even some protein. And once I started doing that, Dave, it made a huge difference. I didn't wake up with, I didn't have the headache first thing in the morning now, which now I know exactly what my underlying issue was: blood sugar and carbs. So I started to like have fewer headaches if I started the day with protein. And I started to put the pieces together when I would go to work or something. And first thing in the morning, they would have like muffins in the break room. And if I would randomly have something sweet as my first thing, it was instantly a headache, like instantly. And I think what was happening is like over time, it was just becoming more, I was just becoming more sensitive or reactive to carbs. So I had to be really careful. And as long as I started the day with protein and had a sort of proteinish lunch, I'd be okay. And I could even have something in the afternoon, like like a scone or a muffin or something like that. And as long as the tank had been primed with protein, I was kind of okay. But now I think I was probably in my mid to late 40s, and it actually was not salt, like, I was even more like, I really could not have much in the way of grains, um, or just very little, like 1 piece of toast or something, I might be okay. It was really sort of becoming like a quantity thing. I had to just reduce it and reduce it, and, I did notice that when I cut out most of the grains, I stopped having any of the body aches completely. So I was still eating vegetables, but I was vegetables and protein and dairy, but I had cut out grains. And when I cut out flour and all grains, I stopped having any of the aches, like the aching pain went away from that. So still with the headaches and migraines actually starting to come up more. And I think the real sort of like things were starting to pile up and just getting more intense was when I went into my 50s. And I think with menopause, it was something around then, like the hormonal shift. We went into the pandemic, and I just felt like, what is happening to me? I'm like, now I'm really gaining weight. I'm not like I'm just eating, sort of what is considered healthy food. Still, occasionally baking from scratch because I like to do that for my kids. And so there were often like cookies and cake, but not really overdoing it. That thing that you've talked about before, how I grew up in a culture that was very food and cooking centric. You'd go to I'd go to my grandmother's and she'd say, want a piece of cake? And she'd make a ritual out of like having the afternoon coffee and cake. So it'd be like breakfast, muffin, lunch, a little treat in the afternoon. As I've heard you describe, you're like always thinking about what's the next thing gonna be that I'm gonna have to eat. And so we're in the pandemic, and I'm just feeling like things are starting to kind of spiral. And I just didn't know what was happening. I made a list of the things that were starting to pile up then. And I think it might have just been the intersection of like menopause and the carbs for me. Um, because I started like the headaches were creeping up. I could really have almost no carbs, grains, I mean, flour, because that would just almost instantly give me a headache. But I started to notice I was losing my hair a lot that was coming out. And I read that kind of thing too. Oh, post-menopause, you lose your hair, thyroid issues get to be a thing. I was cold hands and feet a lot, which kind of goes with that, maybe sort of a slower metabolism. Another thing I noticed that like women, all my female friends that are postmenopause usually say, well, get ready. You're going to lose you're going to lose your waist. And I did. It was like suddenly I was just like straight, like a straight line from top to bottom. And I just didn't understand. I just was like, oh my God, this is what it is. You hurt. It hurts to get out of bed. You lose your waist, you lose your hair. And I think the real like wake up call for me was I was I saw a photograph of my hands. Like I was my one of my kids took my photograph and I saw my hands and I was like, "Oh my God, my fingers are fat." Like not like my fingers were swollen. It wasn't it was so strange. And I remember I had a friend um and we would chat every day. She doesn't live nearby, so we would just, chat on the phone every day during the lockdown. And she was telling me about her lifetime autoimmune diseases that she had since she was a kid. But she, her whole life, has been a vegetarian. And she kept saying to me for my migraines, you've got to like eat more veggies. You've got to eat more. Like what I do every day is a green smoothie, like a huge green smoothie with spinach and kale and blueberries and bananas. And I was like, I don't know. I don't know if I can do that. And she's like, yes. And the flax seeds, and this will solve all your like sluggish digestion issues too. Meanwhile, she's not telling me that, her health is not good. She's the same age as me, so I'm not really sure why she thought, she's been sick with muscle pain and, aches and joint pain since she was a little girl, doing this form of eating. And it's funny how in this world, it always like the mainstream and even the alternative always comes back to like vegetarian harder, plants harder. Like even if it's not working, well then you have to do more and then maybe do it raw and then maybe juice it and blend it, just force down more fiber and all that. So I got the blender, I got the frozen spinach and the chia seeds, and I did it for like a day or two, and I completely lost my mind. I had the worst headache, blood sugar attack, and that's when I was like, "Oh, no, no, no." Like, first of all, I put like a banana in there to make it slightly possible to choke down all those greens. I think it was probably that, but I just felt so horrible after that. I was like, not doing that, going straight back to my protein in the morning. And, I was kind of doing some online research. I was used to being whatever health concerns came up with me or my kids, I'd sort of look around. Is this a doctor issue? Is this a acupuncturist issue? Is this like always looking, is this like more vitamins or is there an herb or nutritional supplement you need? Everything was so disconnected, like whenever something would go wrong. And I don't know how it happened, but one day I stumbled upon, so this was about 2.5 years ago. I don't know how on earth I stumbled upon Paul Saladino because I'd never heard of carnivore and I'd never even heard of keto. I was kind of like, just like I said, in the sort of healthy whole foods, whole grains, make everything from scratch, have it be organic type of community. But I happened to watch this Instagram video of him. And of course, he's changed a lot at that time. I think he was pure carnivore. And I heard this talk where he said plants and their defense chemicals. And it instantly clicked for me, Dave, because the crazy thing is I was a bio major in college and I even took botany classes and I grew up on a farm. And it's like all these pieces started to come together. And I was like, that makes so much sense. When you're growing up on a farm and you're running out in the woods all the time, your parents are like, don't eat anything, don't eat those berries. The first things you learn is don't eat that. Don't like, you walk out in the woods and you can't eat anything. Like if I were lost, I wouldn't know what to eat. I would know not to eat anything because I didn't know for certain what it was. I knew that, like, cows can't eat just any old thing. My dad knew really what, like, the cows had to eat, a very, very limited, narrow diet, and I think that's probably true for most animals. They have a very narrow, species-appropriate diet. They don't can't just eat anything and be okay. And I think it was I started thinking back on my botany classes too, and just everything sort of began to make sense, and all the times that, oh, I would be out in the woods and I would come home with some weird rash, and my mom would say, "What did you get into?" Because rashes and skin stuff usually almost always meant plants, some kind of weird plant you were in or came in contact with. Um, yeah, it just made so much sense, and it's the reverse of what we're told, which is that if you're trying to do like eliminate anything, you should be eliminating meat and adding in more plants because they're so healthy. And when I started at that point after seeing Paul talk and then just being super curious and finding out carnivore was a thing and just kind of doing what everybody does is just making the connections and finding all this stuff. Eventually, seeing Michaela Peterson do a talk and realizing, oh no, the actual elimination diet is meat, and particularly beef if you're super sensitive. So, like, I just immediately started. When I saw Paul's talk, I was like, that's it. I'm just doing it. I didn't tell anybody. I just started immediately. I didn't have a bad time of it really. And maybe it because I already did eat a lot of meat. I'm not sure, but um, it was immediately, I felt the effect. I just stuck with the meat. I cut out the vegetables and the little bit of flour, bread, croissants, muffins I had. And it was immediate. And what happened was I basically stopped having headaches from that day forward because there was no carbs. It was completely a blood sugar thing for me. Um, so no more headaches. I will, here's the thing, most longer term carnivores. I don't know if I could call myself that, but 2 years in, I've definitely had times where I'm like, I wonder what it'll be like if I have a bite of my daughter's pizza when we're out. And I will, so I like to do this sort of self experiment, not because I want to go back to that stuff, but I actually want to see, am I still as sensitive to that stuff? And I am, even after 2 years, if I have like a couple spoonfuls of ice cream or a little bit of a bite of pizza. I've even gotten a headache. I will get an instant headache, basically. I've even noticed that if I just put a few blueberries in my mouth, like just on my tongue, I can feel like it's like some kind of tremor happens in my brain. And recently I did hear, I don't know if it was Dr. Barry saying, you can even get your insulin jumps even just from having the food on your tongue. It's like a pre-digestive insulin boost or something, which makes sense because, I watch my dog. If she sees me cooking meat, she starts salivating. So I know the digestive stuff is starting to kick in just from looking at, you know, food, looking at carbs and sweet things. And anyway, anytime I stray off, it just reinforces. I, not that long ago, had like a croissant midday, and I was up all night long the first night that I didn't sleep because my legs just hurt so much. And I never really regret it because it's like, nope, I'm on the right path. This is completely it for me. I never think about straying or going off. And I think the thing that people talk on carnivore about too is how there's some of this stuff you literally can't wrap your head around or even believe until you do it. And one of those things for me is the food noise. Like, I think back on how much time I spent thinking about food. Like, well, I'm going to have this for breakfast, and then I'm going to have this midday, and here's what we're going to cook for dinner, and what's different. There was so much around variation. and variety. "Oh, there's a new opening, a new restaurant opening in town. We should try it. Try something there." So much drive towards, like, new things, that something being different. Um, Even if you're not hungry and you go to a dinner party and there's food there, well, I wanna try that because that's different and I've never tried that before, or it's just like this, you're just so interested nonstop in food and trying new recipes. Oh my gosh, that was another thing. That was a thing that gradually crept up on me by being carnivore that I didn't know or expect, was that I lost interest in all of it. I don't even see it as food anymore. And so it's very funny when people say, that must be very restrictive because it's not. I'm eating the one thing that I love love in the world the most, which is steak. Like, I was saying to a friend, she said, like, "Oh my gosh, that just sounds so restrictive." And I said, "Well, I look at it this way, there's nothing else I want if I'm hungry. If I were to go, it's kinda like if you went to a dinner party with the love of your life and you see them across the room, like, when you're madly in love, you don't see anybody else. So when I see a steak, I don't see anybody else. That's all I want to eat when I'm hungry now. And also the thing about how you can eat once a day, sometimes twice. Like for me, it's one main meal and then maybe a small, like, protein snack later on in the day. But I don't think about food outside of that at all. It's so simple. And I think it's the reverse of what I experienced my whole life, which is trying to find the solution, all these disconnected solutions. Like, what do I need for the hair loss? What do I need for the weight? What's the solution to this itchy rash or something? Nothing connected. So you're always trying things and it doesn't really solve it. So you're always looking for, okay, maybe I'll try juicing, or I'll try, you know, more flaxseed and chia seeds and all that kind of stuff. What I realized that I love the most about carnivore is the minimalism. It's not what more can I add to do, or what kind of exercise can I do, or what new things should I be eating. It's not what to add. And I feel like that's what everybody's doing. Oh, take this vitamin. Now I need more vitamin D. It actually is the opposite. It's stripping it all away. And that's when everything went away.
So all of those things that you listed earlier, they all cleared up.
Yeah, the thing I was kind of really drawn to at first was the blood sugar stuff because I would get really spacey midday, and sugar would be the worst for me. Anything sweet, even fruit, like I didn't really touch fruit much. So the headaches went away immediately. I don't know, within a week. Like I said, I wasn't telling anyone, but in the beginning, but my friends would, I think I started to say something because my friends are always talking about, "Oh, we're gonna go get this salad at this restaurant," or "wanna try this, yummy thing." We would meet out a lot and I would just have coffee. But at some point I remember saying, "Oh, I'm not gonna have any of that scone, thank you. I'm doing this weird thing. I'm just, like, eating meat." And I kinda like to say that and just see how they respond, and they're like, "What?" Like, "Okay." They try to be like, okay, and seem like they're PC about it or something, but I knew they thought it was weird. But a couple of my friends, this was the next thing I think, started to say, "Your face is changing." Like, that happened within a couple weeks, and they would continue to say it for a long time. And I think right around then, Dave, like maybe 3 or 4 weeks in, I was sitting on the couch with my daughter just watching TV, and I had my legs up and I just kind of looked down at my ankles, and that's where I used to see the swelling from the post-pregnancy edema that never went away. I always had this swelling, like they would check a pregnant woman's level of swelling by pressing a thumb in on the shin bone, and the imprint would stay if you've got edema, and it was always there. And I looked down after like 3 or 4 weeks and it was completely gone. So I think what I saw in my face, or what my friend saw in my face, um, was that all the water retention just went away pretty quickly too. So that was a big thing. Um, I think I've always slept pretty well, but now I sleep like a rock. I've I don't really have sleep issues. There's no pain. Oh my gosh, the energy is sometimes off the charts. So when I wake up in the morning, I'm like, I can't wait to get out of bed, really. And I've had times in the last 2 years where, I don't know, I think I remember hearing a doctor saying you can have a metabolic shift, even like you will sort of in the beginning as you're transitioning into fat burning mode instead of sugar. But you can even have a shift in like 6 or 8 months later. But I remember nothing had changed, but all of a sudden I remember felt like I was filled up with rocket fuel. And I remember saying to a friend, like, the energy's like, it's a bit much sometimes. Like, I am just so steady and high energy until, 4 or 5. And then I start to like wind down for the day and kind of get home. But it's so, the energy's insane. So the other thing that's been really nice, um, is that maybe a month or two in, my adult daughter, who's had a lifetime, she's 30, she's had a lifetime of stomach issues, digestive issues, has gone to the hospital sometimes with severe stomach pain since when she was a little girl. And so she also had what she thinks of as like a clean diet. She would just eat protein and tons of veggies. And she was pretty convinced it was dairy bothering her. So for years, she hadn't had any dairy. She avoided that. Um, and when I sent her that, she must have called me like a month in and I hadn't said anything. But I was like, honey, you might want to watch this video. And I sent her the Paul Saladino video. She's like, I'm doing it. And then the next day, she cut all that out, and all her digestive problems just basically went away. And so she's been doing it too. And also, my best friend hopped on board who had autoimmune disease, just pop up like 4 or 5 years ago. And so it's sort of, I feel like it takes a certain type of person who's kind of a little bit, maybe not really, sort of buying into the whole mainstream thing, or, you sort of have to be a kind of unconventional thinker, I think, to want to experiment and see, like, this doesn't sound right. I'm looking for my own, doing my own research into what's going on. So I have the two of them, and we just, with three very separate health things that brought us to it. And we talk about it all the time because it's really exciting. They've been doing it for 2 years. I've been doing it for 2 years. Both of them afterwards reintroduced dairy when thinking everyone always says it's the culprit to skin things or digestive things. And both of them they drink a ton of dairy now. And they were like, it was never the dairy. My daughter was saying, like, I used to have to clear my throat all the time, and I thought that was dairy. But I've still had it until I cut out the vegetables. I added back the dairy, and it's not she added the dairy back in, and it's not an issue. So it's always been like the
In
vegetables.
Interesting.
So
So
they're heavy on the dairy. I'm not. I just kind of have heavy cream in my coffee, and that's kind of it.
right. So on that point, day to day, how do you eat? You said it's OMAD and a snack, but what
Yeah.
is OMAD for you?
So I will have steak and butter. That's kind of it. And I used to really have I didn't really get hungry until 12 or 1, and so would probably be around then that I would eat a steak, and then sometimes I keep some hard-boiled eggs in, or if there's a little leftover steak, I might have a few bites. It feels really more like a snack at 4 or 5, something like that. But recently, after 2 years, it just randomly just, like, shifted down early, so now I'm often really hungry at, like, 9 or 10. So I'll have a steak first thing in the morning. And then it's just like the whole thing shifted a few hours. I might have a little something at 1 or 2. It's like a half of the 1 and a half type thing. And that's kind of it. But, oh, I meant to say about my daughter too. This is another thing that's almost invisible unless you hear someone else say it. You're like, "Oh yeah, me too." There's so many things. This is the thing I love about your show is that some things disappear and you're not even fully aware of it until someone else says it. And so my daughter said, "I'm never aware of my digestion anymore." And she was like, I don't notice it. It's like I don't notice my heart beating. I don't notice my lungs breathing. But she said, I used to notice my digestion all the time. If I had a salad, my stomach would blow up. I could hear the gurgling. I could hear the rumbling. I felt gassy. And then she says, like, I literally don't notice my digestion at all anymore, which is so true.
It's awesome.
Yeah, I'm just looking at my list again. So it was definitely the migraines, the blood sugar thing. I used to not be able to go for very long without eating something because I would get the spaciness. Now, of course, I can eat once, maybe a little bit more a day, and I don't have that up and down, which is really, I think, what my problem was. And I noticed it took about a year. I was thinking, oh, well, I guess I'm not going to, regain any hair. But it was probably a year and a half in that I noticed that I had, oh my gosh, all over my head, I had hair like this long. So it took about a year and it started growing back, which I just didn't think that would happen. So I don't see the shower drain full of hair anymore like I did for that period of time. Um, I don't get those spring allergies anymore either, which which worsened my headaches. Yeah, so it was really, I think the swelling, I don't have that cold body temperature anymore. Um, yeah, I think it's just been pure benefit to me and I would never go back to anything. I notice, and it's just reinforcement, it's not that I'm looking to go back, but when I here and there have something like, oh, I'll have like an ice cream once in a blue moon in a super small amount because I will have to take a couple Advil if I have something sweet still. It will just give me a headache. So if I'm out with my kids and I just, once every few months have some ice cream or something with them, it's like instantly the carbs make your brain like notice those things again. Like I'll start to, for a few days, it's like, oh, that cookie looks good. And usually I don't notice them, or it's like your brain quickly goes into, "Oh, we're doing this again." Really quick, all it has to take is a little bit like,
Right.
"This is what we're doing again." It's like so
Yeah.
to get on board.
It's just
Like,
that
the difference
one
between
thing.
seeing. Yes. The difference between seeing it and then, like, it just doesn't register as food all the other times. So,
Um,
that's been one of the biggest benefits is that I love the simplicity. It's like, um it's as my friend said when she was looking for all the things too to solve all her various, autoimmune stuff. She said, "We both have tried so many things over the years, practitioners, food, supplements," and she said, "It's like, oh my god, the search is over." And I was like, "It is. I don't find myself thinking anymore, what am I gonna do about the hair loss? What am I gonna do about the puffiness? What am I gonna do about" it's just over. We're on the right track.
so if you were recommending this to any of your friends, or sorry, if they came to you and they said, "Look, you're doing really well, your daughter's doing really well on this carnivore diet, I wanna try it too," what advice would you give them?
Um For me, I think what I did, I liked the way I did it, and maybe everybody's a little different in terms of jumping in or going slowly, but I'm definitely like jump right in type of person. And what I did in the first month or two, because I made like a couple tweaks after those first couple months that have suited me more. And the first thing I did was just say, you just don't want to be hungry. I just didn't wanna be hungry because then I'd notice, like, sweet things. So it's just like, you're gonna if you ever get hungry, just eat whatever meat, animal-based thing you want. So that's what I did, and in the beginning, I was like, "Yay, I love meat." I always have, so I was having, like, sausage, bacon, chicken. I really, really liked pork a lot my whole life, all the ham, bacon, pork chops, so I was eating a ton of that. It was really fun to just kind of what kind of meat am I gonna have today? Salmon, fish, but just everything meat. I was eating a lot of dairy. I would even have something I would even allow for something slightly sweet in the form of dairy, like maybe a Greek yogurt or something. I was primarily concerned with not having anything plant-based, not having any plants, grains, vegetables, fruit, nothing. So, there was a little bit of sugar, and then I think that was so during that period of time, I think it's just like, just pick one goal for to start with, and my first one was don't let yourself get hungry. So eat whatever you want that's animal based. So that was phase 1. And that lasted for about a month or 2, and then but I was eating a lot, Dave. I was eating like breakfast, lunch, and dinner, like big amounts. And then I must have seen someone in the carnivore community who talked a lot about being high fat, which I'd never heard of before. And I listened to Dr. Elizabeth Bright and a few other doctors. I think they said, especially for women and maybe even especially for postmenopausal. I had noticed in that 2 months of super high protein that my pants actually felt tight. And that was kind of interesting. I wasn't gonna go off course, but I was like, "Oh, this fat thing is super interesting." So I just started adding butter to everything that I eat, like cold butter when I eat my steak. And what happened next was really like phase 2, and that was that I stopped being so hungry all the time. So I just sort of brought the protein down more to like moderate protein and high fat. And then I was less hungry and more satiated. And that's when my weight started to go off then. So I wasn't one of those people who lost like a ton of weight. I probably lost, I don't weigh or track numbers. It just doesn't work with my personality. But I probably lost, I would say like 30 pounds, maybe 40. That's what my friends have said too. I lost 3 or 4 clothing sizes down. So, um, yeah, that started to shift when I went high fat too and started making sure I had a lot of butter. So that would be probably what I would say is the main thing is just to stay away from like, just to really get into meat, animal-based, and whatever type you like, just make it fun, and so that eating is a pleasure, and basically don't let yourself get hungry because that's when you're gonna fall for the carbs. So that was the first thing for me, and then I didn't notice this happening until maybe almost a year in. 'Cause I wasn't trying to do it, but even all those other forms of meat dropped away. Like, I stopped buying bacon, I lost interest in pork, definitely never was interested in chicken at all. Um, Sometimes I remember I was like, "I love duck," and I would have some duck, but I'd have it once and then never think about it again. So, I didn't even notice that happened. Like, even then, even all the other forms of meat sort of dropped away. So, great. I love the minimalist life. I just cook something. In 5 minutes, I can eat the steak, and get on with my life. That's it.
It's perfect, right?
It's totally perfect.
Yeah. So, how would you respond to people saying that carnivore is restrictive?
Yeah, I guess I don't I would have thought that before I was carnivore. But now I feel like restrictive is just like having a ton of health concerns, having to think about everything you eat all the time, how that's going to affect you, how that's going to affect what you do. Are you going to be in bed with a migraine all afternoon or something? Like that was just normal life. And now I feel like restrictive is being held hostage by food, like food obsession and food noise. And like I said, when you eat the only thing you want to eat every day, that's not restrictive to me. That feels like, that thing that people say, it's like total food freedom. I have other things to do in life besides eat food. And think
Yeah,
about,
definitely frees up lots of time, right?
yeah.
Yeah. So, Ali, do you have any way of reaching out to you? Do you have any social media?
No, I don't really. I just have my sort of my personal Instagram page, but it's not carnivore based at all. So I'm kind of in the closet carnivore, except for my few friends. And if someone else brought it up to me, I would probably tell them. But your show's actually made me think a lot about, maybe I should be a little bit more. I tend to almost lean more on the side if someone's talking about how they're not feeling well. I don't say anything because I remember, like, if someone told me, I wouldn't have wanted to hear it. But the 2 other friends that came to me were people that knew because I had mentioned it, and then they circled back, like, 6 months later, and they said, "I didn't wanna tell you, but I've been trying out carnivore for a couple months, and it's been going really well." So, I kinda think I maybe should, come out of the closet about it a little bit more and just because, here's the thing, 2 years in, like, in the first 6 months, maybe people noticed things were different, but I kind of realized that if you've been carnivore for a while, they don't notice anymore. They forgot what you looked like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, if they even registered, what you looked like. So nobody says anymore after a while, "Oh, you look great. What are you doing?" Nobody says that to people who've been doing it for a while, and in fact, if I say something like, "Yeah, I haven't gotten sick," or "I didn't get that flu that was going around," they say, "Well, you have good genes." So this is what they say to you after you've been carnivore and you've sort of resolved a lot of stuff. They just tell you you have good genes. So it's almost like we have to keep talking about it, although most people will just think, well, yeah, that won't apply to me. You're just lucky or something.
Yeah, you do get that. But if you do start up some kind of social media, just let me know and I'll include it in the show
Okay,
notes later on.
that sounds
Yeah.
great.
Ali, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. I really appreciate your time.
Me too, Dave. And I'm so grateful for what you're doing because it had a big impact on me too. So thank you.